I'm going to my review of Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards, a film that follows Ford Brody and his father as they attempt to discover the culprit of the 1999 disaster that occurred in Janjira, Japan. First and foremost, before I start talking about Godzilla 2014, I should probably reveal that I'm not the world's biggest Godzilla fan, mostly because, the thought of having a giant lizard either saving or destroying a city, that just seems kind of stupid. But in all seriousness and all jokes aside, Godzilla has never been something that I have found to be enthralling or captivating. If I really wanted to watch giant reptiles fight, then I would just stick with Jurassic Park. But the one thing that had me interested in this film was the trailer that was shown back in December, and I remember seeing it once and kind of being a little smug towards it, I guess, to be quite honest with you. While watching the trailer a second time, I noticed a lot of really neat shots. For instance, one of my favorite shots in the entire film in the trailer was the shot with the soldiers shooting off the flares, and then you see Godzilla's back or whatever. And it's just the way the shot was filmed, the handheld technique. It just had this kind of grit that you don't normally see with movies like this. And furthermore, it just made the movie look very grounded and a lot more realistic in comparison to most summer blockbusters or movies that have giant monsters fighting one another. And it's really all this that really piqued my interest, and I dare say made this movie become my most anticipated film for summer 2014. So I'm just going to start by saying that Godzilla 2014 is directed by a filmmaker, and you might be asking, well, what do you mean? Of course it's directed by a filmmaker. What I mean is, it's not directed by just some director. It's not just directed by somebody like Michael Bay, who has a weird perversion when it comes to special effects and explosions and all kinds of other stuff. No, Gareth Edwards is somebody who cares about cinema, and I'm going to explain that. Everything I praised about the trailer is indeed in this film. It is well shot. The CGI is absolutely incredible, and it does take something that's a bit on the ridiculous side and does make it more grounded and realistic. But what is perhaps my favorite thing about the film is the way Gareth Edwards directs. Unlike Michael Bay, who just goes completely apeshit insane as soon as the movie opens, Gareth Edwards is somebody who believes that less is more, something that I also believe as well. The film really does do a great job at reserving itself for the big climax, and throughout the film you do get little bits and pieces of action sequences and little peeks at the monsters and that kind of stuff to kind of whet your appetite. But what I love about this film is the way it handles its sound design. You know, instead of using a loud and thumping score or using a piece of score that is a bit on the eerie side, the movie relies on its sound design. It's simple, and it is kind of pulled back, and I wish more action films would do this. You know, just kind of let the sound design do the work. You don't have to always use a giant rumbling score to evoke some kind of reaction from your audience. There are a handful of scenes in the movie where a character will be trying to hide, and the only thing you'll be hearing is the sound of roaring or the sound of rumbling or whatever, and it really does do a great job at piquing anxiety and anticipation for what you're about to see next. The way it's directed, I think it's pretty phenomenal in terms of what this film is. Now, one thing I need to confess, and this is indeed relevant for what I'm about to say, but I'm somebody who is typically on the reserved side. I don't get too giddy over very many things unless you're one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, Batman, or The Last of Us, then I could care less. But there's a scene in this film where I actually found myself grinning, and it's the scene where we first get a real shot of Godzilla. And there's really nothing special about the scene other than the fact that he's just standing there and lets out this badass roar. I mean, it's an awesome scene. Since I've done nothing but praise Godzilla, now is unfortunately the time to talk about some of the things that I didn't like about Godzilla. Fortunately enough, though, it's only one problem. However, it's kind of a big one, and it involves the characters. Albeit that the characters are likable, they just lack depth, and they're just not all too compelling. And if you're going to have a film that, like I said, I praise this, and I still stand by this. I think it's great that the movie doesn't rely on heavy doses of action. But if you're going to have a movie like Godzilla and not rely on heavy doses of action, then you have to have characters to kind of fill that hole. And indeed, it does have characters. However, like I said earlier, they're just not all too compelling. And I think, therefore, it kind of creates a somewhat, I'm going to come out and say it, kind of a boring experience at times. And although I wouldn't necessarily define the characters as being poorly written, I would define them as underwritten and very generic, and the same can be said for the story. And it really just kind of seems as if this was all just enough to get by. And I do believe that is a problem when it comes to having a film that does rely kind of heavily on this kind of stuff. So needless to say, although the acting is really good, great talent such as Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, and even Bryan Cranston are quite wasted in this, unfortunately. Overall, Godzilla is the kind of film that you have to see in the cinema in order to fully appreciate it. It's got great CGI and impressive sound design, and it's directed incredibly well. So I'm going to give Godzilla a very, very incredibly high 3.5 out of 5. As always, I'm Colyn Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.